This talk on value engineering. My name is Josh Siegel. I am part of an organization called Hitachi Vantara, which is a global data and analytics company and service provider. We're part of the larger Hitachi family of companies. My background is in management consulting. I have 20 years, spent a lot of time in the financial services industry, and then about 6 years ago, made a transition to big data, analytics, AI, and I've done that in a cross-industry setting for the last several years. I'm excited to talk to everybody today. This will not be a technical talk. Often in the professional services space, when we help customers identify data science projects, analytics, AI projects, the process of moving a project forward can be difficult. There's a lot of consensus building. There's a lot of organizational difficulties related to defining the value of an analytics project and then making sure that you have funding to move it forward. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is construct that I use now and have used throughout the last 10 years, bring people together around a vision for what data science, ML, and AI can do for an enterprise. No matter how you cut it, data scientists cost money, even if they're offshore. Data engineers cost money. Cloud environments cost money. Governance costs money. Adoption and integration cost money. So if you're really trying to deploy something that's enterprise-wide and transformational, how do you get funding for that? How do you bring organizations together? We all know on this call, I'm sure, that data and analytics is a huge challenge right now, and that's not a surprise. I'll let you read some of these statistics, but trillions of dollars spent on remediating bad data. 40%, only 40% of the Fortune 100 have been successful at creating what is now labeled really a data-driven culture for making changes and moving away from legacy systems and legacy processes. If you're on the phone and you're a data scientist or in the analytics space, you know how much time you spend looking for data instead of actually doing the analysis on that data. And it's not as if companies don't understand that there's a problem. Companies are throwing gobs of money at this. They're trying to deploy analytics. They're trying to build data-driven organizations. A lot of them, 90% of them are going to increase spending in the area that we all focus on. So how is it that there can be such a big problem and companies recognize it and throwing gobs of money at it, but we're still unable to really connect the dots? Lots of money being spent on AI, lots of money being spent on data-driven decision-making and improving culture. But according to McKinsey, only 16% of these digital transformations are actually improving performance. And I'll pause there for a minute, because at the end of the day, that's really what we all care about, or we should all care about. How accurate a model is, how technically innovative a AI or an ML model is, might be very, very exciting, and we could write a technical white paper on it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't move the needle when it comes to actual performance. One of the things I'll talk about in this talk is, how do you measure performance? That's a key component in what's called value engineering. So while we know that there's a huge problem, we know that companies are trying to fix it. The issue really comes down to, there's two sets of, broadly speaking, two sets of stakeholders around this issue. So let's think of ourselves as data professionals, data analysts, data scientists. Boy, do we have problems, right? You'll see this list. Some of this will really identify with you, I'm guessing. There's silos of data. There's null fields. There's lack of metadata. There's lack of interest from data stewards. There's what I call orphaned analytics, different analytics platforms scattered around the company, each doing probably overlapping things, and a lot of issues standing in the way of data analysts getting their job done and providing high quality analytics to the business. Those challenges don't necessarily resonate with the business. What they are interested in is the quarterly results. They're interested in making a big splash in the market. They're interested in moving fast and gaining competitive advantage. They're interested in meeting regulatory deadlines. And as I'm sure you realize, these problems are interrelated and they feed each other. The issue is that each of these groups define the challenge a different way. So from a data perspective, we need money to create high quality analytics. But if you're talking to, the CMO or the CIO, CEO, VPs of product in the business itself, they will describe the problem in the opposite way. They will say, well, I need the analytics to move the business forward. And so essentially what we have is a disconnect. Now, the situation I'm describing may not apply to you in your daily life, but in my travels over the last 10, 20 years, this is ubiquitous. This is a situation that occurs over and over again, where two or more sets of stakeholders who really want the same thing at the end of the day, but there needs to be some connective tissue between those stakeholders to really get them to come together around a problem. And the way we think about this is what we call a stairway to value. If you think about infrastructure or data storage, enriching that data with metadata or a data catalog, and then finally being able to use that curated data for high quality analytics that the business will believe in and trust to make their decisions on. That really leads to the possibility of monetizing your data and taking the analytics and the machine learning models that can theoretically be so impactful to a business and actually monetizing them. And so what we see is the capabilities are given to the business as you move up the stairway to value, but funding for AI initiatives, funding for data scientists, funding for the governance and for the stewardship and for all of the curation that has to happen, only comes once that data can be monetized. So it's almost a catch-22, right? Value for the business can't be created without predictive analytics, I would argue, more and more. We've all moved on, beyond business intelligence and reporting. This is now a world of predictive analytics and AI and ML and deep learning. So we can't really create accretive value, additional value for the enterprise unless we have these things. But we also then, the value isn't defined by the analytic. The value is defined by what is actually impacted and impactful for the business. So this is where design thinking comes in. This is where value engineering comes in. Value engineering, quite simply, is the ability to build a business case that connects the modeling that we're all doing to the KPIs and the success criteria that is impactful to the business. That's really the design thinking component. So when you think about it, you can define value through a business case any way you want to. What you really need to do is define the value in such a way that the stakeholder who is responsible for funding analytics initiatives buys into it. That's the statistic, and that is the value KPI that they believe in, not necessarily that you do. And so it really becomes a function of a three-step process. There is an envisioning process where you bring stakeholders together. You cross that divide between how business stakeholders think about analytics and how data professionals think about data and data quality and data analytics. That's the first step, is you build this common understanding, you build common ground. Then it's value engineering. You define specifically what is the value that you're going to bring to the table, and not at the end of a 1-year period, not at the end of building a massive data lake and curating 25 different data sources and building the mother of all AI models. It's incremental value that's important. It's showing that you can make a modest return in a really near-term time horizon. Once that's done, then the scale can come. So I can take you through how we think about this. So as I said, the envisioning process is really about stakeholder management. And this is something that I believe it's McKinsey describes. It's almost like a data translator role, someone who can bring these two sets of stakeholders together. How do you define who will be impacted by your analytic exercise, by the data science exercise that you're undertaking? Sometimes that can be tricky. You'll want to understand who the quote unquote buyer is, who's funding this or who potentially could fund it. You'll want to understand who the influencers are. You'll want to understand whose lives will be impacted. If you're rolling out a model to predict what customers of an enterprise are most likely to attrit over the next 3 months, who needs to really know and understand and believe that this model is accurately defining who will attrit? And when that happens, what is the enterprise supposed to do about it? Do they have to retrain customer service reps who might get a call from a customer who's likely to attrit? Do they have to be prepared to offer up more money to keep them? There's all sorts of thinking that goes through what stakeholders to include in this first exercise. Then you'll go through a set of design thinking exercises to define potential use cases and really work together to link those use cases to a business outcome. And that can be hard depending on what world you're coming from. If you're a technologist, if you're a data professional, sometimes the business outcome that's important to you is not important to the business. You'll hear a lot of ideas in this first step, and so it's important to listen and then to prioritize. And then very, very important is to build organizational excitement. The modeling that goes on in enterprises these days is very exciting. It can be transformational. You could be talking about changing a business model. You could be talking about changes that will affect people's lives and livelihoods. It's important to really internalize the change and build that excitement. At Hitachi Vantara, we do this through a specific process it's called the digital envisioning process. I don't want to get into a commercial about it, but there's a specific methodology, and the results really look like this. Keeping it very simple, trying to build a bridge again between these stakeholders. What's impactful to the business on one axis, and how easy or hard will it be to implement this idea on the other axis? And our whole supposition here, our whole hypothesis, is that analytics initiatives have to show incremental return. What I like to call these big bang, we're going to spend $50, $60 million on a whole new data infrastructure and analytics infrastructure for a global company. Those go over like a lead balloon. There's no appetite to spend that kind of money, because what return could you possibly get that could justify that amount of money? You can get an investment of a couple $1 million and show that you can provide a return of $500,000 within 6 months or $250,000 within 6 months. That shows the business that there is value there and it's worth putting more money into it. So this is how the process works. There's a lot of consensus building, and at the end of the day, the business defines, along with IT and data professionals, the best use case that will show that incremental return. So now let's move on to the value engineering. We've talked about a lot of this, and I'm watching the clock carefully. I know we have about 14 minutes. So you've now gotten consensus with the business, and you have that shared goal, that use case, that if data science, if analytics can show a real movement on a KPI that everybody agrees with, then the funding comes. Then the governance platform gets acquired. Then the spend on the cloud analytics capabilities can move from $5,000 a month to $30,000 a month. You've got to show the business that it's worth it. You build out only what you need in this case. So that incrementalism, if you will, don't load 25 data sources. Don't curate 25 data sources. Bring in only as much data as you need to show that incremental return. And that's what we do. We call it combining the art of the possible with the reality of the practical. And we use value engineering to do this. So here's an example of how value engineering might work. And I'll distinguish value engineering. It's a term, SAP and ERP companies use it a lot. They have automated tools to showcase the theoretical return of deploying that software. This is not that kind of value engineering. This is bespoke, more custom value engineering. This is an example of something we did for a large not-for-profit in the United States. They have certain tiers of donors. Those are segment sizes and the average donations those segments give a year. And what we were able to do after we did our analytics, our value engineering exercise on the analytics we did, was to show that we could identify customers, or excuse me, donors in these segments that were operating like the next segment over, but they weren't being treated like that. And so what this allowed this not-for-profit to do is to pay much more attention to the donors who have been overlooked. Donors who were giving $25 look just like value donors who can give 100. And buried within that value donor segment are another 2,000 donors who have the potential to give $5,000 if only this charity asked them. And so what we did is we showed this charity what the actual impact could be if they deployed this analytic in production and moved past this kind of value engineering and this proof of value phase and deployed this into production. Now, to deploy this in production for this charity, it's not a simple exercise. The analytics are rather straightforward, but implementing the change with people in the field can be very difficult. And so that's why we had to prove to this charity that there was a significant amount of money that they could gain. So that's an example. Here's one more example. This is from the transportation space, an amusement park operator actually, whose issue is downtime of their amusement park rides. And having trouble identifying the root cause of that downtime and trying to reduce it. How do you identify the value that can be saved in that situation? How do you turn that into a metric that the amusement park operator really believes and understands and will free up investment to deploy these analytics across the whole park in hundreds and hundreds of rides? I'm having a mentor session later today. We'll be talking about this example specifically and how we did this. And again, it's a function not only of what you think the value is and how you define the value, but convincing the stakeholders who make the decision to really think the same way. So once you've done that, once you've used value engineering to build consensus and to really define what is possible and what is incrementally available in the near term, you've implemented in a limited production capacity, or you've shown theoretically what's possible in the lab. Now you have support. Now you have stakeholders across the business who are not only supportive of the analytics and the processes and the investment that's needed to be made to make this production scale. They not only support it, they champion it. They want it to happen. They need it to happen. Probably oversimplifying here, but many of us who run lines of business, we have goals, we have incentives to meet. And if you've shown me that deploying this predictive analytics will move the needle on the results that I'm on the hook for, then again, I'm not just going to support it, I'm going to be your champion. And so you have now opened the door to to a really impactful organizational wide operation. And the other thing you've done is you have become self-funding, right? So if your project to deploy production scale analytics is going to cost $2 million in salaries, in subscriptions, in cloud costs, you have deployed the first little bit of that. You're bringing in $250,000 a year, and you've shown that you can generate real revenue and you can fund some of your cost, and you're going to be allowed to continue to grow and continue to go. Then it becomes an effort around marketing your success, sharing that with others in your organization, allowing your new champion to share that for you, and not stopping. Don't take your foot off the gas. You own this. This is only the beginning of the success that this modeling and data science can build for the organization. Keep going. You have a lot more to do. Many of our customers I know who are very excited about a model that works really, really well, then don't focus on the last mile. A model itself, provides a great result, but that result has to be implemented. You have to consume the result. You have to integrate it with production systems. You have to continue to tune and retune the model. These are all things that you can't forget about, because remember, at the end of the day, the real thing that we're all striving for is the impact on the organization, that KPI that you defined way back in phase one of this effort. And those KPIs, have to be those that are universally accepted. Earnings per share, revenue, reduction in customer attrition. Those are the metrics that need to be defined and in the value engineering phase, and then delivered on. And then you rinse and repeat. And I'll just share very briefly how we think about that. You have a model that has been effective and and now you're going and implementing that use case, across the enterprise. Again, this is where you don't coast, you invest, you go faster. What's important now becomes making sure that the business continues to use data analytics, becomes a data-driven enterprise. We have the technology. Technology is available, but what sometimes isn't available is this governance process to continually innovate and bring ideas on what can we do, what might we be able to do. Run those down, go through this cycle again of proving the value, of value engineering. More than likely, you're not going to have a bottomless pit of data scientists. That's a very hard resource to come up with. And you'll have a decision to make. You have one model in production, let's say. You have to spend time with it. You have to retune it. Data sources change, organizations change. That's a living, breathing thing. You can allocate data scientists to continue to keep that model up to date and in production, or you could move them to focus on the next model or the next business challenge. So those decisions have to be made, and they have to be made in a way that maximize the investment that the organization is making. We call that the digital innovation governance cycle. So what I'm hopeful that we reviewed today quickly, but hopefully made an impact with you. Big data, predictive analytics, obviously critical, especially now, to defining and bringing about the ability to monetize data. Business intelligence, data warehousing, orphaned analytics, all of these antiquated technologies are holding companies back. You think about new entrants in the market, all sorts of different industries with no legacy technology baggage behind them. They can move much faster, and they can move faster because they recognize that they're building technology, they're building go-to-market organizations using these new processes and these new analytics. This is as much an exercise about stakeholder management as it is about the technology. So focus on that. That's your first goal, is to bring everybody together, to build a shared purpose and to build a shared goal, which is to move forward with metrics that are important to the business. Once you do that, and you can tie spend on data management, data infrastructure, data analytics, once you can tie spend on those things to business value, you're off and running. And as I said, you don't only have a supporter, you have a champion. You'll move incrementally. You'll show return and improvement as you go. And if you can master that, you've now found a way to become self-funding. You found a way to become central to your organization's growth. And you found a way to use value engineering to connect predictive analytics, AI, ML, all the great things that we know we can do today, but that not everybody understands. You found a way to connect that to multiple stakeholders who care as much as you do, but who think about things in a different way. And now we're in a position to really change organizations. We're in a position to really create value for the enterprises that we work for. So I appreciate your time. I feel very good about it because I'm ending exactly on time. Lena's going to be very proud of me. Feel free to get in touch through email or LinkedIn. I have a couple more mentoring sessions, one today and one tomorrow. For those of you with specific questions, I'm excited to be available to you if you have any questions for me.